Hi everyone, it's Sandra, and we're checking in on Cinderella, who's currently living outside, got a maple leaf in. Oh, there's an earwig who's dropped in on the plastic. Don't want that in the bin. I'm just going to take the plastic off, get rid of that. The brown paper is a good moisture indicator, showing me that the bin still has good moisture in it. So let's take a look at what we did 17 days ago. So 2 weeks ago, I started with a layer of those decades-old bamboo leaves, added a handful of my mostly processed leaf mold made from maple leaves. The bamboo leaves were still kind of dry, so the leaf mold added some needed moisture. Then I topped it up with some poultry bones that I pulled from my Instapot. See my previous video on 3 ways that I use bones in my worm bins. On top of that, I added some previously frozen food scraps, some cilantro stems, carrot peels, and tea leaves. They would add a good amount of moisture to that level. But I topped it up with more of those mostly dry bamboo leaves. But not to fear, I pulled over the damp vermicompost to seal off Cinderella until I checked on it in this video 17 days later. I see some dry bamboo leaves have made their way to the top. Here's Prince Charming, my adorable clay feeding zone indicator. Let's move these leaves aside and just go down a little bit, check on the moisture and the worms, and see what the worms made of those bones straight from the Instapot pressure cooker. Remember, I put a layer of leaf mold in here to give an extra microbial boost. That was immediately beneath the small amount of food scraps that I gave. Is that bone? No, that actually, I think, is a piece of bamboo and a big chubby worm. Let me do some more digging, see if I can find that bone graveyard in here. Here we go. This is a poultry bone. Nothing in the middle, but I don't think there was anything in the middle coming out of the Instapot. And it's easy to crumble fully in my hands. That would have been one of the larger bones, I think, that I put in here. Those were chicken wing bones, if I'm remembering correctly. That bone easily crumbled in my hands, so I think the smaller bones are probably gone totally. Let me just do a total bin stir and see what we find on the other end. I've been giving Cinderella's worms some of those decades-old bamboo leaves for several feeding cycles now. If you've got a clump of bamboo, check in between the canes to see if you can find some of these leaves. This is a rock-hard avocado that I put in here, and look at the worms in it. I don't want to open it up because there's just too many worms. I'm going to end up squeezing them, and I don't want to do that. So I think I'll just leave them to get at it and put the avocado back in the bin. With all this natural bedding, Cinderella's worm bin is really looking like a forest floor, but it is not the same as a forest floor. A forest floor, there would be moisture coming up from the ground as the temperatures cool overnight, for instance. In a worm bin, we've created an artificial environment, and we have to keep this bin moist. This is actually a bamboo cane and not a chicken bone. I got worried there for a moment. So when we keep worms in these plastic tubs, we have to find a source of moisture, even if we're using natural bedding. And for me, this moisture is going to come from food scraps today. So I'm glad that I did a total bin stir because I'm finding really great moisture down the bottom where the castings have naturally gravitated and the moisture. So the deeper I go, the darker and richer the material, and I can bring that wetness right up to the top. And this is going to really do a lot to regulate moisture throughout the bin. It's also creating a really great spot for me to do this week's feeding. At this point, seeing the health of this bin, I'm really questioning, do I need to give food scraps at all anymore? I'm thinking the food scraps are just introducing moisture and that the worms actually are really just digging into all these natural materials I've been feeding. Decades-old bamboo leaves, the compost, the semi-processed leaf mold, all of these things the worms are just loving. And the food scraps basically are a moisture supply. So I don't think the worms need them for their nutrition at all. I think it's more just to help the bin stay moist enough for the worms to breathe. I'm sorry about the wobble there. This is a really high pile of vermicompost up the side of the bin. So for today's feeding, the bedding is actually going to go in dry. If you watched my previous video where we shredded some of those dry maple leaves that had just fallen off the tree, along with some of our pine needles, I'm going to give a healthy helping of that on the bottom. This material ranges from powdered leaves right up to those needles and chunkier bits of leaves. Really great surface area for the worms to get into. On top of that, some really moldy banana peels that I'm going to cover up quickly with a container full of compost. Don't want to get my hands on those bananas. They were previously frozen and had sat outside for at least a week, so that's good moisture going in, I think. My bet is it's going to be enough for that whole new end with all that new dry bedding. On top of this mixture that I'm pulling over the top that had good moisture, I think the bin moisture is going to be just about perfect. I'm not adding more calcium or grit because I actually think the bones are still in there and still doing their thing. Prince Charming takes his place and I put the brown paper on. Again, a great moisture indicator to see whether the bin is drying out. Top it up with the loose piece of bubble wrap, and that's it for Cinderella this week. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.